Tonight on Reporting Scotland, MSPs reject opposition party calls for a penny increase in income tax to protect public services. The Scottish Ambulance Service is forced to postpone plans to downgrade certain kinds of 999 calls. Claims that Police Scotland tries to avoid paying compensation for road accidents involving its officers.
In my experience of these things, they do absolutely everything that they can that is within their power to avoid doing the right thing and to avoid paying compensation.
Also in the programme, Celtic take on Aberdeen in the top-of-the-table clash that could have a huge bearing on the destination of the title. And a look at the Highlands in the 1950s, the unfinished documentary finally being completed. Good evening. MSPs have rejected an increase in Scottish income tax from April. Labour had called for a penny increase in tax at all levels, mainly to fund education. But in a vote at Holyrood, a majority of MSPs said no to that and backed the Scottish Government's budget plans for the year ahead. This from our political editor, Brian Taylor.
And what happens? We're going to take two away. Which two are you going to take?
Sums and choices. Labour's Kezia Dugdale chooses a penny on income tax at all levels, mostly to fund education.
The proposals in the budget today strip hundreds of millions of pounds out of vital public services, including schools. That's 50% of what our councils do. I am not prepared for the next generation of kids to pay the price of Tory austerity.
Meanwhile, outside Holyrood, trade union members, the other wing of the Labour movement, protest against council job losses. In the middle of it all, the Finance Secretary. John Swinney says Labour's plan would punish public sector workers and pensioners, while he wants to shelter them.
I want to say to the teachers and to the public service workers, the length and breadth of this country, who have had to endure pay constraints because of the austerity programme of the United Kingdom Government, that I value the sacrifices they have made, and the last thing I'm going to do is put up their taxes.
A helping hand from Nicola Sturgeon.
Wait to taste my coffee.
Scottish ministers plan to extend the living wage to social care workers and others. Staff at this Midlothian centre already receive that higher rate of pay, but no increase to standard rate income tax. Not now, not next year, when Holyrood should have greater flexibility to vary tax.
I don't think an increase in the basic rate of income tax is the right thing to do.
Labour's tax plan this year involves a rebate, with councils handing back £100 to the lowest paid, including low-income pensioners. But Scottish ministers have branded that plan unworkable, possibly illegal, and say those payments could be taxed. Labour's Jackie Baillie insisted the plan had been thoroughly checked. The Liberal Democrats back a penny on tax for education. New powers, they said, meant cuts should be blamed upon Scottish ministers.
He is imposing the kind of budget that he has previously condemned. The people of Scotland will know that his refusal to act means that every single cut to public services in Scotland is a John Swinney cut.
Thank you.
But John Swinney received decidedly ironic support in resisting tax increases from the Conservatives.
It gladdens my Tory heart to hear these self-proclaimed Social Democrats and political progressives on the SNP benches arguing so vigorously and so passionately against increases in taxation. To coin a phrase, Presiding Officer, we are happy to be better together with the SNP on this issue.
To the votes tonight.
Are we all agreed?
Not by a long shot. Labour's tax increase was rejected. John Swinney's budget was backed. Brian Taylor, Reporting Scotland, Holyrood.
Well, staying with tax, it's emerged that the deadline to try and strike a deal between the UK and Scottish governments on how new tax powers for Holyrood would work could be breached. Our correspondent David Porter is at Westminster for us. So tonight, what's happened, David?
Jackie, these talks on the so-called fiscal framework have been long, they have been very detailed, and to many they have been tortuous. But tonight it appears at least the UK government is taking contingency measures because it thinks that the deadline imposed by the Scottish Government for these talks to be concluded of the 12th of February may well slip. Now, coincidentally, in the House of Commons today, MPs this evening have been debating public spending in Scotland. It gave the Scottish Secretary, David Mundell, a chance to lay out his position and the way the UK government seems to be moving towards thinking that that deadline may not be met. He said that it was better to get a deal that was right than to rush it.
Keen as though I am to have a warm and supportive relationship with the Scottish Government, I've never felt the St Valentine's Day date had much relevance to this process. I'm willing to continue to working towards a deal as long as that takes and as long as we can.
The fiscal agreement is vital. As Lord Smith himself said, it's fundamentally important in making Scotland's new powers work. It's the final piece in an interlocking jigsaw, and we couldn't agree more with that, Mr. Speaker.
So what seem to be the missing pieces in the negotiations jigsaw, David?
Well, this really goes down to the nitty-gritty of it. It goes down to money, Jackie, that in future, when Scotland is able to raise its own taxes, what that will mean for the amount of money that Westminster provides through the block grant and whether Scotland would be disadvantaged or not compared to the rest of the UK. The Smith Commission says there should be no detriment and it should be a deal that is fair to both Westminster and Holyrood. At the moment, there are differences of opinions between the UK government and the Scottish government as to what that means and how it can be achieved. There will be more talks in Edinburgh next week. This one will go to the wire, but there now does seem an acceptance, certainly from those in Whitehall, that actually the deadline may be breached, but they remain, they say, it is better to get it right than to try and rush something as important as this.
Thank you very much, David. David Porter there. How much time does it take to potentially save a life? The Scottish Ambulance Service was planning to downgrade certain kinds of 999 calls, which meant crews were given longer to get there. But now those plans have been postponed following the intervention of the Chief Medical Officer. Well, our health correspondent Eleanor Bradford joins us. Eleanor, so what kind of calls are we talking about and what changed?
Well, Jackie, the ambulance service has hundreds of categories of calls, but they're classified either category A, B or C, depending on how fast an ambulance is needed. Now, ambulance bosses wanted to change some types of call in category A to category B. Now, that affects how quickly you'd need to respond to them. By making the changes, it meant that paramedics would have 19 minutes to respond to these new category B calls rather than the 8 minutes they had previously. But the types of call raised some eyebrows. They included chest pains with abnormal breathing, chest pains with a history of heart attack or angina, and, for example, for being not alert after falling. So those plans are now on hold whilst the Chief Medical Officer satisfies herself that all this is safe.
So different categories of patient need a different type of response. These codes are quite old, they're 30 years old, and in fact our treatments and our response times have of course improved over those years. So perhaps now time has come to actually look in more detail at these codes because we want to sustain the best outcome with our current treatment.
So why were those changes being considered in the first place?
Well, it all depends on how you look at it. Opposition politicians and some paramedics have said that it was to make it easier for the ambulance service to meet target times for responding to calls. At the moment, the ambulance service has a target that it should get to 75% of category A calls within 8 minutes. But last year, it only reached 66% of those calls within that time frame. However, the ambulance service itself says that it's doing it for medical reasons, that it's looked at 6 months' worth of data and that this is not only clinically safe, but that the unions are actually in agreement that this should be done. But as you heard the Chief Medical Officer say there, the whole system is actually based on quite old data and quite an old system. And in Wales, they've gone even further. They've been more radical and they've done away with target times altogether. What they have started to look at is simply whether or not the ambulance gets there quickly enough for the patient to make a good recovery.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. You're watching Reporting Scotland, and still to come on tonight's programme, a rocket launched from Scotland is the first to make it into space from UK soil.
And in sport, it's the big one at Pittodrie. The Premiership's top two go toe-to-toe. We'll look ahead to that. And we're on the shop floor with the part-time footballers hoping to pull off the greatest of cup upsets.
Scotland's third biggest bank, the Clydesdale Bank, has become independent again for the first time in almost a century. It's being sold off by its owners, the National Australia Bank. Here's our business correspondent, David Henderson.
How can I help you?
It's had a place on Scotland's high streets since the 1830s, and now the Clydesdale has a new lease of life. For years, its owners, National Australia Bank, have wanted to sell it off, so they've taken on billions of pounds of Clydesdale's debts, leaving the Scottish Bank largely free from the burdens of the past.
We have independence, and what that really means is that we will be able to make the investments in our customers based on what our customers need, as opposed to having a third party forming a view. So we listen to our customers, we decide what they want, and we deliver it. And having independence to do that is a hugely important part of our strategy going forward.
By the time the Clydesdale Bank built these headquarters here in Glasgow, it was already helping to fund the rapid growth of the Empire's second city. The bank financed Glasgow's pioneering water supply and broke down barriers by offering lending to women. These days, Clydesdale Bank is a big player with 121 branches in Scotland, and its partner, the Yorkshire Bank, has 154 in England. Between them, they'll serve almost 3 million UK customers. So they're the biggest of the so-called challenger banks, ready to take on giants like RBS.
Historically, banks have benefited from inertia. People just haven't wanted to change their current accounts because we'll be able to look around and see better deals. I think the rise of the internet as well facilitates that. So that environment means for the consumer it's probably a good thing.
We all have a place that means something to us.
And with that in mind, Clydesdale's keen to boost its mortgage lending and grow its business that way. So competition for customers may be hotting up. David Henderson, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
The police are there to help us when we're wronged. But what happens when police are at fault? Well, one of the country's most experienced lawyers in personal injury claims has accused Police Scotland of doing anything to avoid paying compensation after incidents where its officers are to blame. Suzanne Allen has this exclusive report.
There's nothing left of Leona Rice's car, which was a present from her granddad. 4 years ago, with her family inside, she was involved in a collision with a police car.
I was pulling out a junction at Beaumains Road, Bowness, and I was turning right and the police came along. They were on their way to an emergency with no sirens and no lights on. I had internal bleeding in my leg and cracked ribs and also suffered from panic attacks after the crash.
The police charged her with driving without due consideration, but it was found not proven in court. Her solicitor says Police Scotland will try anything to avoid paying compensation after accidents like this.
When a police officer is involved in an accident that is their fault, they do not seem willing to do the right thing. They don't seem willing to stand up and to say that we need to make just recompense for what's happened. They circle the wagons, and in my experience of these things, they do absolutely everything that they can that is within their power to avoid doing the right thing and to avoid paying compensation.
In the past 3 years, Police Scotland have paid out over £633,000 in compensation, but that's dwarfed if you look at the London Metropolitan Police. In just 1 year, they've paid out over £1.8 million, although they are a bigger force. Patrick Maguire says the police are slow at settling claims, unlike organisations of a similar size.
Other public service bodies and how they react in terms of the fire service, in terms of the NHS, in terms of even the post office. Other organisations are more akin to the attitude of insurers when involved with members of the public. The police force just stand apart.
Leona is angry police haven't taken the blame.
Well, I'm disgusted in the way that the police have been about the full thing. I just want them to admit liability because it's been proven in court that it wasn't my fault, and I would like my compensation.
Police Scotland gave us this statement.
We have more than 3,500 vehicles which cover more than 70 million miles a year in all conditions, and many of these are in high-risk circumstances as our officers do their job in keeping people safe. All compensation claims are assessed in line with an agreed process.
Suzanne Allen, reporting Scotland.
Now let's take a look at other stories from across the country. A fourth person has died following a crash on the M9 last Friday. 37-year-old Sajjad Ahmad was the driver of a Mercedes which was involved in the collision in West Lothian. His wife Sadia was pronounced dead at the scene and their 9-year-old daughter Aisha died on Saturday. The driver of the other vehicle, 42-year-old Mark Hansen, was also killed. Two boys aged 10 and 14 remain in a serious condition. 7 members of the Executive Committee of Scotland's biggest mosque have resigned after they and their families were allegedly subjected to threats and abuse by opponents within the Muslim community. In a joint statement, they said that their efforts to improve the representation of women and financial transparency at the mosque had been opposed by traditionalists. No one from the mosque has been available for comment. Police Scotland have confirmed they're investigating the matter. 2 women have been charged in connection with an assault at a care home in Fife. The women, aged 57 and 61, were arrested following allegations of an assault at the Chapel Level Care Home in Kirkcaldy. HC1, which runs the nursing home, said it had suspended a number of staff. A man has been arrested and charged in connection with a fatal fire in Fraserburgh 18 years ago. Gordon Graham died in the blaze in the town's High Street on the 3rd of May 1998. The 42-year-old man is due to appear at Peterhead Sheriff Court tomorrow. Plans have been unveiled for a new section of dual carriageway on the A96. The stretch east of Inverness includes proposals to bypass the town of Nairn and contains a separate 18-mile pathway for walkers, cyclists and horse riders. It's the first part of the Scottish Government's commitment to dual the entire route between Inverness and Aberdeen. Work is about to start on a complete restoration and extension of one of Europe's most historic cinemas. Details of a £2.5 million contract to reopen the Picture House in Campbelltown were announced today. Work will begin shortly and the cinema should reopen next spring. It's another giant leap for Scotland in space. A rocket from the Hebrides missile range in the Western Isles has become the first to be launched into space from UK soil. But the achievement, which happened last year, almost went unnoticed. Our science correspondent Kenneth MacDonald explains.
T-minus 10 minutes to Terra-Orion target launch.
It was the military exercise that made history almost in passing.
There was a large naval exercise run by NATO, and as part of that they were doing some missile intercept operations, and so for the first time they launched a missile from the kinetic operated range in Benbecula, and it went up and into space. So that's the first time any object has went into space from the UK.
This is what it looked like. But there will be no place in a museum for the American-made rocket, because the point of the exercise was to blow it to bits over the North Atlantic. Nonetheless, a first for the UK and a first for the Hebrides missile range.
That's where my family croft is, according to the family head history. So it'd be great to see some real spacecraft going up into orbit from Scotland.
And that could happen soon. Prestwick, Campbelltown, Stornoway and Leuchars are among the 6 sites vying to be the first UK spaceport. It would handle horizontal takeoffs like those offered by Virgin Galactic, so there could be space tourism up there and for the rest of us down on planet Earth.
People will come to see space launches. And when anybody says, would somebody go to Mac Greenwich to see a rocket launch? Well, people go to Cape Canaveral to see rockets launch. They even go to Roswell in New Mexico to look at a plastic alien because they're so interested in space. And 500,000 people go there every year just to go into a bar which has got a plastic alien in it.
Scotland's space industry already supports 5,500 mostly highly skilled jobs. The first Scottish-built satellite, UCube-1, went into orbit in 2014 from Kazakhstan, so a vertical launch site here could bring benefits.
If it takes a couple of weeks to get it to the launch site, because that's in South America, then that's a long time. So if we can build it in Glasgow and we can launch it from really close by, just by jumping in the car, going to the launch site, put it in the vehicle and get it into space within a couple of days, then you're really compressing that time period.
Kinetic, who run the Hebrides range for the MOD, say they have no plans to use it as a commercial spaceport, although they do say they have the expertise to support a spaceport anywhere in the UK. Kenneth MacDonald, reporting Scotland.
Our next port of call? Sorry.
Thanks very much, Jackie. Good evening. The Aberdeen manager, Derek McInnes, says his team faced their toughest task of the season tonight when Premiership leaders Celtic visit Pittodrie. As you can see, just 6 points separate the teams at the top of the table. After tonight's match, there will be 14 games left and the difference could increase to 9 points or be cut to just 3. Nothing wrong with my arithmetic for once. Here's John Barnes with a look ahead.
This is the third meeting of the top two sides this season. It's one win apiece from the previous two, with Aberdeen the winners the last time Pittodrie was the venue.
Celtic are always the toughest challenge for us, you know, and for any team in the league that's always the toughest fixture. But for us it's also the fixture that gives us most opportunity to win against them and to inflict, you know, some damage on them as well. We've already beaten Celtic. It'd be nice to go and do it again, and that's what we hope to try and do.
Smiles from Ronnie Dyla yesterday after picking up the Manager of the Month award for January, which is slightly different to Sunday after the League Cup defeat from Ross County.
Alex Schalk strokes Ross County into a 3-1 lead against the holders. Celtic's treble hopes potentially in smithereens again.
I'm very disappointed after the weekend, all the players and everybody. But again, it's 3 days and then it's a very, very important game again. And we can put ourselves in a very good position now. So we have everything to go for up there in Pittodrie and get 3 points, get 9 points clear. And that's very, very good if we can do that.
Aberdeen are unbeaten in their last 10 league games, while Celtic have lost only 3 domestic matches all season. The question is, whose impressive statistics will be enhanced tonight?
And there's full coverage of the match on BBC Radio Scotland, online and digital as usual. The radio programme, but not the match, is underway already. Now, the Rangers manager Mark Warburton says he's not concerned about what his championship rivals are doing after watching his team retain their 8-point lead at the top. Andy Halliday was the goal hero for Rangers in a hard-fought win away to Raith Rovers. Nearest challengers Hibernian kept up the chase with the same scoreline at Morton. Recent loan signing Anthony Stokes, the man with the game's only goal. Well, after Celtic's top-of-the-table Premiership match against Aberdeen, they face an altogether different challenge. The Lowland League side East Kilbride in the Scottish Cup on Sunday. If the South Lanarkshire team wins, it would be the biggest upset in the world of football. It would also make the part-timers £5,000 per man richer. While he's doing this, they're doing that. And when he's doing that, he's doing this. Such is the life of a part-time footballer.
This is where I work during the week from 6:15 to 2:15, Monday to Friday. And then come Monday and Thursday nights, we've seen me down at K Park training with East Kilbride and on a Saturday playing with them.
Not this weekend though. Anton and workmate Jordan are playing on Sunday when East Kilbride face Celtic.
Well, it's just trying to embrace it really, because it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, really.
The kitchen company they work for is promising to pay every East Kilbride player £5,000 if they beat the Scottish champions.
Well, money shouldn't really be incentive. You're in football to to enjoy it and to get as high as you can. So football's a funny game, isn't it? It's 11 v 11 at the end of the day. You never know what can happen.
An EK win may be fanciful, but in the town, there are some believers.
We Celtic played last week, but we'll see.
Well, it's a one-off, isn't it? Let's hope they win, because Celtic are playing rubbish now.
Nah, if they can keep the score down to about 2, that'd be good.
I think I'm going to say 10.
No, about 2.
Even if Kilby pull off the greatest upset in the history of Scottish football, come Monday morning, Anton and Jordan will be back making kitchen units. And I'll be back here tomorrow night, Jackie.
That's it. We've got some new sports pundits there. Get them on. Thank you very much, David. Thank you. Now, an unfinished documentary about the Highlands began in the 1950s is to be completed and given a premiere. It was made by a group of filmmakers who ran out of money. But 60 years on, it will at last be shown on the big screen. Our arts correspondent Pauline McLean reports.
Lost Treasure examines the changing face of the Highlands in the 1950s, the most ambitious project to date for the Dawn Cine Group, a filmmakers collective based in Glasgow.
Distant shot, giant sheep farm. Long shot, bog.
But their film was never finished, the project abandoned when the group ran out of money, and forgotten until film festival director Matt Lloyd contacted Scotland's Moving Image Archive.
Not only did they have about 40 minutes of footage just sat there, silent footage, that as far as we knew hadn't been used at all in any form. They also had the original script. So really, I was just really keen to bring this footage to the light of day.
The script meant they could not only edit the film, but create a new soundtrack.
You can guess what the mood they were after is. And although that mood might involve using different music now, it does give you a pointer towards the sort of tone that they would like to have had over that particular part of the script. It's like a sort of phantom director that is not in the room with you, but is in the script to help you along and guide you.
And while the original filmmakers may not be around to see the premiere with live score, it's hoped some of their families will.
Maybe there are children or grandchildren that we haven't been able to contact that might hear about this and come out of the woodwork, and maybe there's more footage that was shot. You know, as far as we know, this is all the footage we have, but there may be more reels in someone's garage somewhere.
The rain is fairly lashing and it's through the puddles splashing.
And maybe there's a sequel to this aptly named Lost Treasure. Pauline McLean reporting Scotland.
Oh, it's fascinating. Now here is Andrew Kerr with details of Scotland 2016.
We'll have expert analysis on today's budget debate as the fight rages over proposed tax hikes. European arguments escalate in the House of Commons. We'll hear from those in favour of in and out and up and away. More on the story of the secret space rocket. That's Scotland 2016, tonight at 10:30 over on BBC Two.
Well, a nicer day for some of us. Weather-wise, here's Gillian with what's waiting in the wings.
Well, hopefully you made the most of the sunshine, Jackie. That's all I'm going to say. Good evening to you. It was a lovely day for most of us, certainly compared to what we've had. Lots of scenes like this one sent in by one of our weather watchers in Fraserburgh. But it is set to go downhill. Most of us are starting the night dry, temperatures falling away quite rapidly. A few wintry showers for the Northern Isles and the North Highlands. And then into that cold air, we introduce a weather front. So it will turn quite wintry for a time. For central and southern Scotland, the snow mainly confined to the hills, but from about Perthshire northwards we could see some wet snow even to low levels and some accumulations over higher level roads, but they'll be fairly short-lived because we're pulling in milder air. By the end of the night we'll be up to 5 or 6 Celsius on the west coast, and that is an indication of what's to come, because during tomorrow this warm front will work its way steadily eastwards across the country, introducing milder air certainly, but also introducing a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain. Most of the rain will be light and patchy, no real weight to it, but certainly amounting to a grey day compared to what we had today. So this is a picture around 3 o'clock, a lot of drizzle for the southern uplands, for the central belt up into the central highlands. Still quite persistent rain at this stage for Aberdeenshire and the North Highlands, with Shetland faring best in terms of dry weather and sunshine. A fine day here, although you'll still be in that cold air, so temperatures more like 4 or 5 Celsius. Into the evening, and that rain does get up to Shetland. Elsewhere across the country, it stays cloudy, it stays damp. The rain most persistent across western Scotland. Another relatively mild night, but then we head into Friday and it's all changed once again as a cold front works its way across the country. So eventually it will turn colder through the day, and we'll also see some heavy rain with this one, particularly for western and southwest Scotland. And we've got a yellow warning from the Met Office, an early warning, meaning be aware, because that rain could lead to some issues with localised flooding, certainly hazardous driving conditions, becoming windy again too, winds touching gale force around the coasts. Now that rain clears for Saturday, a bright start, but wet and windy from the southwest again later on. That's the forecast. Jackie.
Thank you very much, Gillian. And now, just time for a reminder of tonight's main news headline. MSPs have rejected an increase in Scottish income tax from April. Labour had called for a penny increase in tax at all levels, mainly to fund education. And that's Reporting Scotland. I'm back with the headlines at 8 and our main bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, from everyone here, enjoy your evening. Bye-bye.